Testing. All right, can you guys hear me pretty well? All right. All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to my presentation. First of all, I'd like to give a thanks to the UtahJS organizers, sponsors, and volunteers. So let's give them a quick round of applause. Also, please come to me after the presentation and come get a Firebase sticker. Firebase sent me a whole bunch of stickers, and I need to give them all away. So please come down and get them. Also, know that the slide and the code are going to be available both now, so if you wanted to take a picture, or as well at the end of the presentation. So I'll give you guys just a couple quick seconds to take a picture of that. I do this so that you guys can focus on me and not have to worry about taking meticulous notes. All right. All right, time's up. All right, so who am I? My name is Jared Potter. I've been developing software for over 9 years, ever since my senior year of high school. I've always really enjoyed the process of taking a bigger problem, breaking it down to its individual components, solving those components, and then bringing it all together into one solution. There's a very satisfying feeling about that then, and it's just as satisfying today. This summer, I set 2 specific goals for myself. Number 1 is I wanted to climb the tallest peak of every ridgeline along the Wasatch Front and here in Salt Lake. And the second goal was to do a kick-ass job here at UtahJS. That first goal is inspired from last year. Last year, my girlfriend Amber and I hiked Mount Olympus, and we were trying to get it to the top in under 2 hours. Unfortunately, we missed it by about 12 minutes. That motivated us to go back this year, and we did it in 1 hour and 48 minutes, and we also brought the Hurricane brothers, Gus and Luger. We still have 1 more peak to go, which we're hoping to knock out tomorrow. But as for the second goal, we're going to go and get started on that. So Firebase, the best free-ish platform for building your personal projects, prototypes, and enterprise applications. Let's go ahead and set some expectations for this talk. So number 1, what is Firebase? We're going to talk about that. Also, we're going to learn about how to get started with Firebase ridiculously fast. We're also going to look at the core services that make up Firebase, as well as a live demo. So please pray that it works. Live demos are always exciting. What this presentation is not is a deep dive onto all of the different services that Firebase and the greater Google Cloud Platform provides. They're really great services, but we're not going to be focusing on those today. All right, so let's talk about a few issues or things that you would rather be spending time doing. Would you rather spend time fighting deployment issues with your application or your website? Would you rather be configuring custom authentication stores? Do you want to build custom real-time database solutions? Do you want to actually be using a server in 2019? Or do you want to actually be building your applications? I know which one I want to do, and Firebase is going to help make that possible. So let's quickly talk about what is Firebase for those that don't know. So the way that Google introduces Firebase is that it helps mobile and web app teams succeed. Another way of saying that is Google Firebase is a platform to create a unified backend. It does that through some of these core services right here, from authentication to web hosting, as well as a lot of other services. It's backed by the Google Cloud Platform. What makes Firebase different from the Google Cloud Platform or AWS or Azure or things like that is that it provides a higher level, better user experience for developers. All right, so I want to find out how much experience the room has here with Firebase. So I want everyone to put their hand up who's used at least one of these Firebase services. All right, then hold them up. So who here has used at least 2 of these services? 3, 4, 5. All right, there's a few of you guys who are pretty familiar with Firebase. That's great to hear. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right in. Let's talk about creating our very first project with Firebase. First, you're going to go to console.firebase.google.com. You're going to add your new project, and then you're going to go through the process of giving it a name. In addition to that, you're going to go and optionally turn on Google Analytics right out of the box. And once you select that, you begin to create the project. So right here is a real-time video of the project being provisioned by Google. We're going to wait for it. All the suspense. All right, boom, we're done. Once you're finished, you get this dashboard for Firebase. the first thing we're going to do within our project is create an app. So you can create mobile apps or you can create web apps. Here we're just going to create a web app, give it a name, and go ahead and register it. From that, we're going to get our configuration right here for our web app. We could take this and drop it into our web app and immediately start getting access to Firebase. However, we're going to do it a little bit in a better way. We're going to use the Firebase CLI. So you can install the Firebase CLI with npm install Firebase tools. Once you have that installed, you can run Firebase login from the command line. Once you do that, it opens up your browser and allows you to go through a login process. Once you've successfully logged in, the command prompt will let you know that. And then from within a project, so I have this Vue CLI boilerplate that I started with. I go into that project folder, and I run Firebase init. This is going to start the Firebase process in this project. It first lets you select which services that you want to use. In our case, we're just going to do hosting right this moment. And then it's going to ask us whether or not we want to use an existing app that we've already created or a new app. Because we already created the new app on the website, we're going to use an existing app. Here, we're just going to go ahead and select that UtahJS Conf 2019 project. Once we have that in place, it's a pretty simple command. We run npm run deploy, which is a script in my npm package that runs npm run build to build our project. And then it runs Firebase deploy, which is the magic. Once your project is finished being built, it takes your production build of your web app and pushes it to the cloud. And you can see down here at the bottom is this URL. There's our live web app right now. This is just a basic Vue CLI. We have a live site running HTTPS right out of the box. That was really easy. So next we're going to kind of take a look at the 5 core services that make up Firebase. And we're going to do that by looking at some challenges that we face when we run into problems with each of these services. So first of all, authentication. What are some of the big ones of that? One is security. Obviously, you want to make sure that whatever authentication system you're using is secure. Running HTTPS, as well as making sure they're using enterprise-grade security as far as like hashing their passwords and not storing plain text. If anybody's storing plain text passwords at their job, you should leave immediately. You also want OAuth 2 support. So you want users to come to your app and be able to log in instantly with existing authentication systems rather than creating yet another account. There's also scalability of authentication. Do you need to create an authentication store that just manages maybe a few dozen people, a few hundred people, or hundreds of millions if you're building a large social network? You want your authentication store to be able to scale to that. There's also features. So you want things like email verification, password reset, and SMS verification. These are things you want in your store. So let's see what Firebase has to offer in regards to authentication stores. Number one is you get a 5-click out-of-the-box authentication solution. So you get that enterprise-grade software. If you've ever heard of the phrase, don't roll your own crypto, this is it right here. If you need an authentication system, just use Firebase. Don't build your own. There's also all the features that you want that come automatically with it. Again, verification, password reset, SMS. And there's also all the OAuth providers that you get. Google, Facebook, GitHub, whatever have you. And there's also SDKs. For all the stuff I'm talking about today, there's SDKs for both web, both platforms on mobile, C++, as well as Unity. So no matter where you're at, you can use these packages. So let's take a quick look at the dashboard. So here's the dashboard that you get from a brand new project. And all you have to do to turn authentication on is click this button. It then lets you select which providers that you want to turn on. Initially, we're just going to turn on a standard email password, so yet another account. But you can turn on any of these and immediately get access to them in your apps, fully secured. Here is one user you can see on the authentication store. Here you can manage information about it. All right, so now that we have authentication out of the way, I want to talk about these security rules. So the way Firebase gets away with not having to have their own layer of validation or authentication with certain things is that you have to build yourself is these Firebase rules. It uses these matching patterns to drill down to specific matching statements for collections and then documents within those collections. Here's a more specific example where we have a collection of cities, and within that collection of cities are documents of cities, and then on each city is a collection of landmarks, and then you can get down to a specific landmark. And here you can say it says allow read or write if whatever condition is met. So on the previous slide here, you'll notice that it says if the request, auth user request, is not null. That's the way it validates that a user is authenticated. You can also do data validation of requests in here as well. All right, so speaking of databases, let's take a look at what's important for databases. So again, security, okay? 101, you want obviously all your communication to be done over HTTPS. And the other part about security is you only want people who have access to a particular data, allow them to have access to. Other people who don't get it. There's also real-time functionality. If you're building an app that has real-time functionality like crypto traders or things like that, you want to be able to have that real-time functionality in your application. Also, input sanitation. There's known vulnerabilities of databases. You need to make sure that things that are coming in, SQL injections or things like that, are protected against when you're building a database. How do you go about doing that? There's also decentralization of data. You want your database to be spread out across multiple data centers depending on where your users are at. You also want scalability. So if there's a whole bunch of traffic that rushes to your site, you want to be able to have a database that can provide that bandwidth and just have that scalability. And lastly, you want some sort of flexible and performant interface to interact with, whether that's REST or whether that's GraphQL or something else. All right, so let's take a look at what Firebase has to offer as far as databases. There's two options. There's the real-time database, which is their legacy system. But there's also their more modern system called Firestore. Firebase recommends that you use Firestore if you're building a brand new application, so I recommend doing that. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. There are specific use cases for the real-time database that still exist. It's still good. But again, we're just focusing on Firestore today. All right, so let's take a look at Firestore. So Firestore is a NoSQL style database made up of collections and documents, and then potentially sub-collections and sub-documents within that. Really quick point. This allows for basically infinite scalability versus a lot of other solutions. So you don't have to even think about it. It just does it for you. Real-time functionality. With the SDK, you literally are able to subscribe to certain data in your database, and it will automatically get those updates via webhooks. Firestore also has very expressive queries, so you can really kind of drill down to the specific data that you need or the criteria of data that you need all in one line. This also allows for pagination, which is really awesome if you need to build an app that has multiple pages and being able to grab whichever page is actually the one you need. There's also an offline store support. So if you think PWA, the ability to cache data on the client so that there's a better user experience for your users. And lastly, the database does support those Firebase rules that I was talking about. So you don't need to build your own layer. It's already right there. Oh, lastly, sorry, the Firebase SDKs, again, make that all possible. All right, so here's a quick example of a Firestore query that is from the demo. So the demo I built was two parts. One part was a node function running Puppeteer that goes to the UtahJS website into the Conf section and basically scrapes all of this speaker data. Right here, with that speaker data, I attempt to go to firestore.collection. Then I go into the speakers collection. And then I can put a where clause on that and then specify what field I want to match what value. And then we call the .get command. This is all a promise, which is why I'm awaiting it at the beginning. And then once I get a response back, either there's going to be data in there or there's not. If there isn't data there, then I know that this is a new speaker, and I can just add that. But if they're existing, I update. And you can see that here. There's also, this is the dashboard for the Firestore. So again, you have your collections on the left-hand side here, your root collections, and then you have your documents. And then within your documents, you can select a particular document and look at the structure that it's created, or edit it. Similarly, there's also filters. So here you can specify a name of a particular speaker, and it will show you that particular speaker right there. And this is really handy for when you're just trying to figure stuff out, but obviously in a production environment, you wouldn't necessarily be using this. All right, so let's take a look at storage challenges. So again, number one, you only want people who have access to data to be able to access that data, and those that don't have them don't. You want decentralized data, so you want the assets inside of your storage bucket, your photos, your videos, your documents, what have you, to be available in, again, multiple data centers closest to your users to provide the fastest possible experience. And scalability. How much crap can you throw in your bucket before it becomes a problem? So let's look at what Firebase has. So Firebase has a storage bucket. I'll be honest, the storage part is pretty straightforward across the line compared to a lot of other people, similar to functions. But we'll go ahead and spend a little bit of time talking about it. Again, the storage has support with the authentication that Firebase provides. You also get signed URLs, so the idea to create a URL that expires in the future. This is a way that you can also help protect your content. And again, There's an SDK for this. So one really nice thing is as you upload files with it, it provides you that upload progress, which you can display to your users, so you can provide that really great feedback to them to create a great experience. Here's what the dashboard looks like. Again, it's just a bucket full of a bunch of files. So down here on the right-hand side, you can kind of see this download information. You can also just grab this URL and also just host it on your site as well, and that doesn't have anything to do with the signed URLs. It just is the file itself. All right, so let's take a look at now hosting challenges of hosting your web app and the things that we run into. So the first thing, again, is security. I know we're having a theme here. Again, HTTPS everywhere, as well as, pardon me, yeah. So anyway, with security, you want to be running HTTPS with your web host. There's also scalability. So when are you going to have a high amount of traffic for your site? Can your service, serve all that up in a reasonable time if your site goes viral? And how does that compare to your low traffic? There's also the speed. The speed of your app, which is how quickly does your app basically get up onto the page. If people go to your web page and it's too slow to load, they're going to leave. A couple other points here is ease of deployment with web hosting. So how do you go about deploying the application? How difficult is it? DNS, how do you go about setting up that for your users, for your domains? Scalability that we talked about, and speed. I got a little bit out of order here. And then last, any sort of hosting issues that you might run into with your existing hosting provider. Firebase does a great job of dealing with a lot of the headache for you, so you don't have to. So with Firebase, you can deploy your web apps with just 2 commands. Again, the npm run build and then npm run deploy, and you have your web app onto the website. You get free HTTPS. So instead of having to go and buy your own certificate or go get a free one from Let's Encrypt, and then after 90 days it expires and you have to deal with it again, and then also configured on AWS, which can also be a headache if you've never really done it before. With Firebase, it's not even an issue. It's just taken care of for you, which is awesome. Also, easy DNS setup. So I'm going to show you that in a little bit here about how easy it is to just plop your domain in and have it running. There's also the support for multi-tenancy. So within one Firebase project, you can have multiple web apps or mobile apps and/or mobile apps. And this is great if you're creating a platform where you have multiple apps running, but you need them under the same umbrella or the same database. All right, so here's what the hosting dashboard looks like right here. You can go ahead and click to configure the hosting. You go ahead and give it just a quick domain name that you have control of. And then it gives you the TXT record right here that you'll take and put into wherever your domain is being managed. Once you do that, you can verify and it'll go live. Here I don't have I don't own this domain, so I didn't put it to live, but there it is. All right, so the last but not least is challenges that we face with servers. So think always on servers that we deal with. So you have to deal with the hardware of servers. You have to deal with the software of servers. Even if you're running virtual servers, there's still software that you have to manage. There's also the always-on nature, which is both a good and a bad thing in the sense that, one, you're probably going to have really nice response times, but at the same time, it's going to be more expensive. It's highly related to availability as well. You want your functions to be available and ready to be run. And then scalability. Again, how quickly can your server scale up or handle lots of requests? If you talk about scaling physical hardware, good luck. You just have to buy another server. All right, so that brings us to the world of serverless. So the people who don't know what serverless functions are yet, because I'm going to assume that this is also geared towards beginners, a function is, number one, it's pure awesomeness. And number two, think of a function as a function like within your program, but instead of calling it in your program, you're calling it in the cloud. It has this idea of a scope that it runs through and that it finishes. And then it returns and then it's done. Once the function is done, the server cools down and it's no longer running and you're no longer being charged for it. There's a few different kind of functions out there. A couple of the most common ones are HTTP functions. So this is just where, again, you can hit Postman or just your web browser directly hitting the endpoint. And then there's also time-triggered ones. So if you want to have certain functions be running on a periodic script, that's really helpful. So let's take a look at what Firebase functions look like. So Firebase functions run Node, specifically Node 8 and 10. You also have native TypeScript and JavaScript built in, as well as these cron jobs. So again, those time-triggered events, you can set them up to run database cleanup scripts, or if you need to do web crawling, at a periodic time every day, that's really helpful with functions, cron job functions, and they're really easy to set up. So let's take a quick look at a function. So all a function requires you to do is import the Firebase Functions SDK. And then once you set that up, you literally just say functions.https.request, or onRequest, pass in the request and response object. Here is just a simple hello world example where we are just going to return hello world. All we need to do is run Firebase deploy functions, and boom, on the dashboard we have our function deployed. And then we can hit that URL right there with that function, and boom, there's our hello world function running HTTPS on the live website. All right, so let's go ahead and take a quick look at the demo really quick here. All right, let's see here if we can get this to a reasonable size that everybody can see. OK, so first we're going to run my function right here. And because I'm just running it locally, I'm just going to run node index. So what this does is it opens up an instance of Chromium, goes to the UtahJS website conference page, and then it starts going through each and every speaker and basically crawls and scrapes this information off of it. Once it goes all the way through that, it's going to put all that stuff into my Firebase database, my Firestore database. So we're going to go ahead and end this right now for the sake of time. Oh boy, there we go. And then what I'm going to show you right here is this is my Vue web app right here that I want to deploy as well. So I'm just going to come up here and run our npm run deploy. So it's going to go through and build our project in a production form. Once the build is finished and it puts it into the distribution folder, it's going to go ahead and start uploading these files to Firebase. And again, here's our temporary URL. So we're just going to go ahead and open that up. And boom, here is our login page. So again, this is being secured with HTTPS with a full certificate. Here, I'm just going to go ahead and log in with Firebase. And once we log in, we can pull in all of this speaker information right here, view people's talks. As you can see, we're logged in up here, and we can log out. Here, I'm just going to go ahead and add a quick speaker here. So let's go ahead and grab these two right here. This is Gus and Luger. And we're just going to call it two brothers because they're brothers. Oh, there we go. It's a true fact that it's harder to type with everybody watching you. So right now, I'm uploading this file and the data here to both the bucket as well as the Firestore. Once it is uploaded, we now have Gus and Luger added to the speaker list here at UtahJS. All right, so that's the demo here that I want to show you guys where we're tying together the Firebase Hosting, Firebase Authentication, Firebase Buckets, and Firestore. In addition to that function that runs on a cron job to go and scrape that information every day. So one real quick thing I wanted to point out really quick here while we're here is the pricing of Firebase. So one really cool thing about it is that they have a free tier that is really good. I've never received a bill from Firebase, unlike with AWS or Azure. When their free tier ended, I still got a bill. It was kind of frustrating. With Firebase, I've never received a bill for all of the different projects that I've built. If you're looking to build an enterprise app, they also have great options as well for paid options. All right, so let's go ahead and jump back into the presentation here. Turn off my mirroring. All right, so it's challenge time. So I challenge anyone who's new to Firebase to go and build a brand new web app and put authentication into it and deploy it to Firebase. See how quick and easy it is for you to do. If you have any questions, please come down and talk to me. If you're somewhat more familiar with Firebase, I suggest that you go find a couple services that I talked about today that you haven't used and integrate them into either an existing app or a new app. And if you're an expert to Firebase, I'm going to say expert because I don't think anybody's an expert in anything at the end of the day. Everyone's constantly learning. But if you are, I challenge you to go build a full-blown end-to-end application. One bit looking forward is that Google has announced that there's going to be a data center in Salt Lake City early next year, after also being in South Korea. This is going to be awesome because we're going to have instant loading, database authentication, apps, whatever you want here in the Salt Lake Valley, which is going to be really awesome. So if you start building now, you're going to be ahead of the curve and ready to deploy come early 2020. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Jared.